Hi, welcome back to my channel. So today we will be learning how to create the base painting for this flower here. And this is the photo reference. There will also be a variant of a simplified bud. So before we start today, I would like to inform that we will be sharing the workspace with a monster at the back. She has been taking over my workspace, claiming it as her own habitat. So yep, it is what it is. So let's see. I don't know what we can do about her, but let's hope that she doesn't move around too much. So before we get started with today's demonstration, we will actually be learning the differences between a normal painting style and the minimalist, spontaneous, loose brushstroke painting style. So what do we usually do when we want to paint something? So when we were young, we were taught that we need to just sketch first, and then after that, for digital painting, we would usually just paint one base painting and get the shape correct first. Then we would start stacking sketches using brushes. And the brushes that we use most of the time, we would just be using the normal round brush like this, and we would just be painting. And then once we are done painting and stacking all the paints, we would use a smudge of some sort and we would just smudge it around to blend. And then we would continue building more layers this way. And then lastly, after that, we would use the sketch brush to just put in all the details that is missing so far. So you can tell that the process is very coloring based. So it's like a coloring book technique, sort of. Why I say coloring book technique is because we are mostly using just sketch brushes. We are sketching, we are not painting. So we would just put all the details in using the sketch brush, and then we would call it done. And we would remove the sketch and clean up the edges, and then this is how the coloring style looks like. And what you notice from here is that it looks very rigid, stiff, very detailed, very realistic. Like, it's really suitable if we have a canvas and this is like the only thing that is on the canvas, and it's like super bombastic, full of realistic textures and realistic rendering, right, at high resolution like HD 4K. But today I'll be actually sharing a technique that is more minimalistic and more spontaneous, that looks loose and fast. But the workflow isn't fast, it just looks fast. For the loose workflow, this is how it would look like. We still have our base, but the base is built with another brush. Okay, so I'll get into brushes later on, but it's built with another brush with a texture and a flow that you like, that you love the style of that particular brush. So without the sketch, it looks like that. So it looks like there's movement. So there's movement here already, and it's not realistic anymore. Okay, so that's the first clue, it's not realistic anymore. We stack the shading the same way like we stacked just now, but we are retaining a lot of textures and brush stroke movements. Okay, then we will continue stacking, and we retain the brush stroke movements in order to keep the essence of the painting. Like right here, you can tell that the movement of the brush strokes are all like rake, right? You can see like there are strands, and this one has strands too. And the reason why I chose this is because this petal has a lot of strands, so it's just quicker that way to just use brushes that has a texture similar to something I'm painting, right? It saves time. Makes sense, right? Okay, then stacking on it, I follow the flow of the strand. I just follow the flow with the brush. So it's actually following the curve, and it gives the illusion that it is having all these veins in here, but it's simulated with brushstroke. Okay, then the same thing, and then lastly I would just dump in the highlights. And so if you see from far, what is the difference between these two styles? Okay, so this is a bit loose using brushes. So this one, like I said, you can actually just feature this in a canvas, but this one you can't because it's so loose, like it looks incomplete. If it's incomplete, it does not mean that it don't belong in the painting. It means that like maybe this is part of a bigger painting, and then this is the focus, and this is something in the background that you don't need to focus so much on. And you can continue like reducing details, the further they are in the background in order to lose the focus. So this is the most important thing that we want to get to today, which is simplifications based on intention. And lastly, there's a last style. So the last style is based on the latest brush pack that I've created called the Impasto brush pack. So this Impasto brush pack uses a lot of thick paint. I have this Impasto right here. It's from this one, Creamy Spread 2 Thick Paint D. So I just lay this down. Okay, it's a sketch like that. Using the 3D smudge tool, the soft pull 3D smudge, anything with 3D smudge in this brush pack, I can literally resculpt this entire piece here to match the shape of my artwork. And then after that, I can just carve away what I don't want. So once I have this, I have the shape already. So I did just that and I clean it up. And then I would just drop in the color like this, like so. I will actually stack a darker version to get the shadows. You see the shadows are here, here, and here, right? And then I'll just quickly stack in the highlights. So this is also a valid simplification because this is thick paint simplification. You can actually like decide simplification and what style you want. So today we won't be doing this coloring style. I'll be teaching you how to get here so that you can lay this on top of this. Okay, so the example is like this. This is the rose that we'll be painting today. Okay, and then we can lay the impasto on top of the base painting. So here I have some brushes. This is a round brush, a flat brush, and a fan brush. So for this round brush, when we paint, if we just draw it like that, we would get a line, correct? But if we press and then let go, it's the same thing as pressing down and letting go with the digital brush. This is a very typical flat square brush. Okay, so if we paint it like that, we will get something like this. If I paint it with just the edge like this down, we will get this. But if we press and let go and twist at the same time, we would still get something like this. Especially for fan brush can do a lot more. You can do thin lines, you can do flats like this, you can twist it, you can dab it to get like bushes, many things. But this one fan brush cannot be represented digitally with just one brush because this straight line is using a sketch brush. And then if I use it this way, it's equivalent to doing this. If I just dab like that, I might be doing this instead. Digitally, we have a lot more brushes just to visualize a single brush and its possibility. And the choice of brushes that you have in your library that you constantly love to use dictates your style. You always almost ended up making your own brushes just to stand out or just to be different a little bit. Some artists like to use with these kind of brushes. They can just do this by stacking and then they just blend it out, but it's all smooth at the end of the day. And it looks different, but it looks like their style. Before we begin this tutorial, you first have to ask yourself like, what are your brush strokes that define who you are? And it's easier to answer this question if you already paint traditionally because you prefer certain brushes. Like for me, I am a huge square brush person. Okay, so like you see here in my Impasto brush pack, my main brushes for base painting is just this two, the rake brush and the dry square brush. I'm a very simple square person. And also, of course, it depends on the way you add textures. Like the way I add textures, I like to use the spray brush and I like to use the texture brush. And sometimes I use this cross stamp brush. You should always just look back at the marks that you make on a canvas or a painting. Then that would actually give you a lot more clue on what brushes you should use digitally to represent your style. Like for example, if you like the way this brush behaves, it's like very random, but you can also do like knife strokes with it. The degree of spontaneity, the degree of like changes and variations that is out of your control is going to be the dictating factor on how your painting looks like. The more out of control the brushes is, the more you need to let go and the more it can push you out of your boundaries to try something new. So this natural sketch is smudge brush. So this is a perfect brush for me to demonstrate to you how you should practice on the canvas in order to get a library of your brush marks, okay? You can start to do lines like this and then try and do a square line with it. And you see the square mark using this brush is very different from the square mark that I get from a square brush. So if you just indefinitely use this brush, of course, the whole painting is going to look very different. And try to do triangles with it and petals. And then try to do bamboos with it. Press, you let go, you press again, then you come back. So if you do it fast, it's going to look like that. And find out like how your brush marks looks like. Then that would actually help in getting your style developed a lot faster when it comes to spontaneous painting. This is a brush stroke. This is also a brush stroke. One brush stroke. This is also a brush stroke. This is also a brush stroke. So now there's two brush strokes. So what do we learn from this? A brush stroke does not mean it has one color and one value. A brush stroke can have multiple values, multiple colors. It can even have textures. Now, this is a brush stroke. When you smudge inside of multiple brush strokes and you carve it to form some shape that looks like one shape, this is a brush mark. A brush mark can have many colors inside, many textures, and many values, as long as you read it as one brush mark. So this is very important because when you're going to start the tutorial and exercise, you will be creating brush marks. You are creating brush marks by grouping together brush strokes and making sure each brush marks looks good. So to get started, this is the photo that we'll be working from today. So you can find just any flower photo and it will also work because we will learn all about simplification. So the first thing we want to do when we have this is to have a sketch. Right, so when we have a sketch, we are actually going to immediately turn on our brain. We would think about what to keep, what not to keep. Okay, because we are artists, if we follow everything exactly, that's more like an engineer or a mathematician, right? And we don't want that. We want to create something that is different based on our own personal preferences and emotional state and blah blah blah. Obviously, I have to keep this to frame the painting like a vignette. I think that the stock is too long, it shouldn't go all the way there. So we're just gonna stop halfway and then let's just get all the way up first. And then I'm not gonna have the window shadow, and this shadow is also very distracting. So let's just move it like this way. Okay. So we just connect that way. And then for this one as well, we're just going to slant it the same way. And once you see a rough planning of what you're doing, you will be able to tell the movement of the painting. Like there is a lot of lines going this direction. We should introduce more lines that way. Like maybe like this leaf goes that way and this one goes this way, so this one should be following the same line of thought, and then this connects to the shadow to simplify the shape in total. And then for the flower itself, we add more tendrils here. And of course, I've mentioned a lot of times, flowers are basically concave with cylinder or a cup, and then the flowers outside are really optional and subjective and really depends on if you want to add more or less. It's totally up to you, right? So for the flower, you can just sketch it as it is, but emphasize the inner cup first. For this one, this is the cup. Whatever is inside needs to stay pretty intact. This petal here must stay, and this part here you can add more, reduce, it doesn't really matter, as long as this cup stays. This is the cup, this is the cup, and then in the center is where you can do your fun things. You can add or just make a triangle and frame the triangle to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, for the petals outside, look at what you like. Let's say for me, I like this because I like how it curves And I like how here is like darker and here darker a little bit. And then it goes like that, right? So I like that. I want to keep that. And I love this because I would like to do this line. I love to do this line with impasto. So I love that. So I will maintain this just to have this flow. And then for this, I feel that it's flowing down too much. So I won't keep this at all. Maybe I'll just keep like that because it's just falling out of the flower. It just looks weird. So you can actually make active choices like this and add more or less, or make smaller, make rounder. If this flower is in the background, you can choose to represent it as a bud. It's just a cup with this part here intact and nothing else, like that. I would suggest that if you're doing this exercise, you start with a bud and a flower so that it just gets your brain turning. So this is a sketch that I have. I find that nowadays my photo reference in this reference panel are desaturated. So I usually add 5 to the saturation before importing it back in, so it will look like this instead, which is the correct one. Okay, so if you find that your artwork are becoming more and more dull compared to your reference, this is probably why. So today's a brushstroke tutorial. I won't be talking a lot about colors or values. For those who can watch my other tutorials. Okay, first thing to do is to add a canvas like this. Okay, once you have the canvas, I usually like to change the color to match the background a little bit so that it's easier for me to paint and there's less work. So the first thing that I would do is just to create a new layer and paint on top of this layer with a spray brush. I just use a noisy spray brush to paint the background a little bit. I'm just quickly picking colors to get this done so that I can get to the actual tutorial. And once you have the background block, it should look something like this. And then the next thing that we want to do is to look at the reference. So when I look at the reference, I'm seeing a lot of orange speckles in the background, and I obviously want to represent that into the painting. So if I just pick this using the dry square brush, if I paint, I find that it's not giving me a lot of results, most likely because the color has already changed and it's no longer relevant to where it was. Like this looks orange because it's against the background that is darker and bluer. So the easy way to do this is just to use it to frame the flowers instead. So I would actually just paint something like that. So when I paint, I am more worried about my brush marks than the actual color itself. I don't really worry about the colors or the values yet. So let's say I have this brush mark already. I will actually just do some erasing. I like to paint and carve. I paint with the dry square brush, I carve with the red brush. But now I'm going to use the wet grunge brush to carve it so that I have some interesting shapes at the bottom a little bit. And then after that, I will create a new layer, clipping mask it, and use a spray brush. Any spray brush would do, doesn't really matter what brush you use actually. And I would paint over with the correct value and color. And then after I'm done, I would have something like this once I figure out the correct color and value. So make sure that your workflow is the same, which is you prioritize the brush strokes first and how pretty it is. Then after that, you put in all the values and the colors and everything. So right now I'm creating a new layer, and on this new layer, I am going to just block out the shadow color a little bit. Not the darker shadow, not the blacks yet, just like this tone. Everything that is of similar value, even though if it's in a different color, I will block it down first. And I will prioritize like the strokes. So when you're in this mode, your priority should be your flow of your brush marks. For example, this leaf, I'm going left and right. I could have done it up, down, but I chose left and right. So if I choose left and right, I know that the impasto is going to fade this way later on. And you're actually deciding that right now. Like for example, this part where I've already dictated the directions of the brush mark. So I know that the brush mark is going to flow this way. And you see that I'm retaining the flow more than like the shape itself, because I'm like more worried about the directions and the flow than anything else. Same goes for everything. You are just dictating the way everything moves. So like this one, is it going to move down first before going here, or is it going to be like that above? And then is it trailing in the sense that if you are using the palette knife, it will actually trail like that, right? You are also deciding that. Your smudge should be on the rake if you're using the square brush to build. So for this part of the leaf, I want it to go this way. So I'm putting a couple here first and erasing this part and then carving out and then see if I can just flow it back in. Okay. So in traditional medium, this could be done with just like 1, 2, 3, 4 marks, but digitally I'm using a lot more strokes just to get the same effect, which is why I really don't prefer doing these tutorials because they take a long time. And I'm also going to dictate this shadow right now. If you find that you are running out of space, like I want to carve here, but if I do, I'm going to erase my previous shape. If you find that that's happening, you can just create a new layer. But I'm quite extreme, like I am usually carving out lines as well, like all these lines that I could just easily draw. If you don't want to do that, you can just do the big shapes first. And then for the lines, do not use the sketch brush. It's gonna be too stiff and coloring like. Use the fan smudge to do this line and try not to get a perfect line. Like stop in undoing and getting the perfect line. Just accept what you get. What you get something more natural and something that is not very predictable. So right now I want to carve this, but if I carve it, I would actually over erase this part. So I can just start stacking layers to continue making brush marks on this layer. And for the rose, I am going to target everything that is this red. So just a rough shade. I want this and this has got to happen. And then I'm deciding if this goes like this or like this. Because this is all about stroke design. Whatever's inside, you don't have to worry. Because you can't see the strokes anyway, it's all painted. It's whatever's on the fringe, the outer fringe, that you have to like decide. So of course the cup has to be rounded. So once you have your version, it's going to look something like this. You just have a shape for the shadows but not the blacks yet. And then the next step to do is of course to color this layer first. So to do that, you just create a new layer and make it into a clipping mask, and you can already start to recolor the whole layer. So do you have to be thinking about brush stroke when you're coloring it? Yes, if you are already planning the brush strokes inside, but like for example, if I want it here like that, so I'm already starting to plan for the final stages where inside the shape the brush mark is going this way. I would advise that every single layer, it looks done. Like for example, this stage, if I just turn off the sketch, it looks done-ish. Like I could just submit as a painting and say that this is something abstract. Every single stage looks good enough to be the final piece. So, and the only way to aim for that is to aim for beauty in the brush strokes. I'm going for a triangle in the center, so I'm leaving the triangle pretty red and making sure this stays orange a little bit. And for the rest, I'm just dropping in the colors that I think is correct and the value that is correct. Okay, I'm just changing the values a little bit. So I am coloring this piece based on what I have right now. Like right now, the flow goes this way. I'm not painting it this way to go against the flow. I have to follow the same motion. Okay, so once you're done, you're gonna end up with something like this. And it's gonna be pretty apparent, the flow of the strokes. Like there is a flow here and there's a flow here. So there are already movement in the strokes. And remember I said that every stage has to look done. So it looks like this right now. So this looks like a complete painting because the brush marks looks harmonious. Like this one brush mark has textures in it and it has variations of colors and values right here as well. and you can tell that it's already hinting or suggesting at something. Okay, now for the next layer would be the blacks. The blacks is always the simplest to do, and because there's already like a base here, so it's easier for us to lay down the blacks. I'm just gonna pick a black. Don't have to worry so much about this. Remember, you can always use multiple layers to get things done. Just make sure you make like beautiful brush marks. If you use multiple layers, remember to merge them down after you are done. So once you're done with this, it's time to go to the flower again, which is the main topic of the day. So for the flowers, obviously there's not going to be any blacks, but you can use this to add more detail to the flower. Okay, so for example, this is a bit darker here, right? So let's just try and add that here. Doesn't really matter if it's like black right now. We are going to recolor everything anyway. Okay, so when you're done, it's going to look like this. Then after that, it's just a matter of inserting your colors and your values inside, which is pretty straightforward, and it will turn out looking like this. So I used a lighter version for the flower to redefine the tones a little bit so that it's easier on the eye. So you can see that based on the sketch, what's left are the important bits, like the shape sitting on top of all these shadows, because what we are doing is just shadows for now, and the shape for the flowers itself. So the real work begins here. Okay, so what you have before are usually strokes that you can almost just blend out. Because they are shadows, they sit in the back. So if they sit in the back, the edges don't have to be so sharp. They can be a bit soft at certain points. So if you have them soft, it don't draw that much focus. But if you keep them very sharp like this, it's going to draw focus compared to this section here. Now comes the real work. So we're going to start with the flowers this time, because that's the focus of the tutorial anyway. So like for example, this petal right here, you can obviously tell that there is more than one value or more than one color, but they can still sit in the same brush mark. You don't have to separate the brush mark just because they are like different components inside of this petal here. So like this one, I really wanted it this way. I'm going to just immediately use the rake, remove some of the lines inside, and then notice that I'm working from bottom up, because if I start doing here and then I want to carve out this line, whenever I erase, I will hit something that I've already done. So work from one side to the other. So this is just the brush marks for the petals that are sticking out that I want to lay out properly for this layer. Okay, you saw my movement just now. I went like an L. So I'm gonna undo that because I realized I painted without the intention of forming the correct brush direction. So this should be the correct way to do it. Right. Be mindful what you're doing. Each step of the way, are you going left, right, up, down? Where is your brush mark flowing? Like for here, I want my brush mark going this way. And I don't want to carve, so I'm going to find the correct size to make this brush mark. All these are easy because it's long this way, so the brush mark should naturally just follow the length of the shape that you want to go. So it's just a matter of carving and becoming very mindful when you're doing it. Don't just copy blindly. So for this part, you can choose to leave it faded a little bit because it's right at the edge of the flower. It shouldn't be sharp because it's in the background already. The sharp part should be like here, where you want it to be focused on, or like the prettiest petal. That's where you want it to be focused on. Okay, we can just leave it like this for now. Okay, now for the leaves, same thing. So you can see why I took so long with this tutorial is because there's a lot of philosophy and basics that I needed to cover, like the simplification of the shape or complexity of it, and then the style, and then what is a brush stroke, blah blah blah. can be quite technical, but now that I have explained all of that, I find that I have nothing else to teach when I'm demoing this, because you guys should already understand why I'm doing things the way I'm doing it. Like why am I erasing partially and not even caring to cleanly erase it and leaving like marks like this all behind? You should be able to guess the answer, right? If your answer is, I left it because they contribute to the flow of the brush marks, ding, you got it correct. I didn't leave it on purpose. It just wasn't my priority to cleanly erase it, because I'm erasing for the flow, right? So once I see the flow is there, I just stop because I want to be quick. So why should I continue erasing something when I've already achieved my objective, you know? Here I'm gonna erase to maintain this brown line here. Extend this a bit. So this is why I love the paint and carve tool, because it leaves like marks like this behind when I am just painting and carving, and it just gives like a trail of your intentions, right? It gives a trail of your intentions of what you're building and how you're building it. But people will be wondering, did I purposely just leave it there? Or is this, how is that done? The answer for every style, every output lies in the workflow. So once you are able to figure out an artist's workflow, you can do the same thing, usually. Yeah. But if you are stuck in that kind of rabbit hole of chasing workflows and styles and artists that you like that keep flipping every month, I would suggest that you just focus on yourself instead of wasting your years away trying to attain something that's not even yours to begin with, because your goal is to find something that belongs to you. So this is what we have for this layer. Like, it's getting there already, and you can tell it's no longer suggesting a rose. It looks like a rose already. And of course, after that, you can just lay in your colors, and your colors will look like this. So it's just the same value but different colors. So I organize my layers based on values, but I work based on brush marks. Like this group here is for the blacks, this one is for our darkest shadow, and this is for our midtones just now that we just did. But every time I work based on pretty brush mark. Okay, that's what I would say. Okay, so what's next? It's really simple. Once you get here, I'm sure you know how to complete it on your own already. You just have to put in your highlights in the same way. The higher you get in terms of like layer hierarchy, like you see from bottom up, it gets sharper and you have to work slower to get prettier brush marks. So now that you're on the highlights, it's imperative that you get the prettiest brush marks in order to complete the base painting. So this is the completed base painting. I just added these highlights. So after that, you can just easily add impasto. So with the impasto, it looks like this. And you can tell that I only use this brush. This is the only impasto I use. I used it here, I used it here, I used it here, here, everywhere. And then this one was the round thick paint, which is this one, round thick paint. Yeah, you can see it's just one brush. It's a matter of just using the impasto to follow the directions of the strokes that you already have. Your stroke's going this way, this stroke is going this way, this stroke is going down. So I'm just following the strokes and it matches because the flow is the same. This is the old still life that you guys wanted me to demo, but I felt like if I demo this I would die because it's like so complex. But what we have just painted is like this flower, because this is the most complex one. So this is where simplification starts to begin, and of course these two are the ultimate simplified version of the flowers. Of course, if it's from a photo, they are not going to look like this, they are still going to look like this. This is artist's choice, like artist's choice of simplification like this. Remember I said that one brush stroke can be many things, like this is one brush mark, but this is different color and different textures as well, but it all belongs to the same brush mark. So when I paint traditionally, I can be adding to the same brush mark as well. I paint white first, then gray, then brown, but it all flows together looking like it's just one brush mark or one brush stroke. Okay, so now I'm going to teach you how to simplify. Like just now I mentioned that the bud has to be like either a cylinder or a cup. So this is a cylinder type of rendition, but the cylinder cap is right here where it was, like it's the same position. It's just simplified. First of all, your material of reference is already all here, so you don't have to worry about colors. If you want this color, you can just put it here. This one is right here where the cylinder is here. Then right below here, it's gonna be here. So this is here. I'm just picking colors in the same location. This is the same location as here, right? This one is here. Let's just pick all the colors first and then we'll see what happens, right? Okay, let's make this look more like a cylinder. Now it looks like cylinder, but there's no cap. So let's make the cap something like that. See, the colors are all here. You just have to drop it in and figure a few things out. So once you have figured the color and the shading, everything, you're gonna end up with something like this. Once you get everything done and down, and then you just stop and look at it and think like, how do I simplify this? Like this is still too much. Like this line, especially this whole part, it's too much. It's gotta be unified and one. Then that's where it can just fade nicely into the background. So the way to do it is to just make a new layer, use a big brush from the rig brush, try and find a flow. Try and find a flow that suits the modeling, the shape of the subject matter, and try to find the colors that can flow. It's a long process, requires your brain to be wired in from the beginning. You're constantly solving problem, you're staying active. It's not a meditation process. It is not a process where you're relaxing and chilling out and just painting without turning your brain off. For me, I thought I could go this direction. And just by sketching like this, I have identified the flow and the color roughly. So to test this out, I place the impasto in. So we have the impasto from the leaves already, and then we have to test out this impasto to make sure it works. So to test it out, I decided to use this square smooth thick paint. So it goes like that. I can just do it like this to get a real definition at the edge like that. And then I can drop this in right here to complete the brush mark. So when I did that, I got this. So I just flow towards that direction and I drop this brush mark in for that. But right here, it still looks a bit edgy, like geometrical. So I added another brush mark here because I feel that this one brush mark is not holding the shape together properly. So I have to add more and see if it stacks together properly. So these are like optional lines that I was testing with. If you test like this, the chances of you getting the result is higher. Like for now, I can see that based on this, I can easily get this done. So I can make a new layer, copy the canvas, and paste it. So because everything is in this layer already, you can smudge things easier and you can test things easier. And I can see that it's finally starting to form the result I want. It's subjective. So once you think that you have reduced enough detail, you can just call it a day. So how do we know this is done? Let's see. Okay, let me just remove the bud. Okay, let's just copy this canvas and paste it as well. So now we have two. One is the rose and one is the bud. Rotate it a little bit and see how it looks like. Reduce some details here a little bit. Very quickly add in the stems. Look, it matches. And not only that, it's right in the background and it's not disturbing the focus of the other one. So it's not going to end up looking the prettiest all the time, because it's just a simplification of this. So but this should be in the main focus and this should be the end result. But you can use this, like, you know, for the background, and this is how you can simplify your brush strokes and have loose spontaneous brush marks. And okay, so give this a try and let me know what you think in the comments down below.